revenge. For us. For us. For us.
The boardroom on the 28th floor of Vale Dynamics had never felt colder. Not because of the temperature. The AC hummed its usual sterile rhythm, but because no one at the table could bring themselves to look at me. Except Eleanor. My stepmother sat at the head of the obsidian conference table, posture immaculate, her diamond cuff catching the recessed lights with every calculated movement. She tapped her pen, once, a quiet signal that the performance was about to begin. "Marissa," she said, smooth enough to disguise the blade beneath, "this portion of the briefing is for family shareholders only. We'll need you to wait outside." I didn't move. I didn't argue. I simply lifted my gaze to her, slowly letting the silence settle like dust. Across the table, Lucas pretended to shuffle papers he didn't understand. Grant scrolled through his tablet with the bored confidence of someone who believed he'd already inherited everything worth taking. Both born into the Vale name. Both raised to believe the headquarters overlooking San Francisco belonged to them by default. My mother had married into the family, but I'd kept my biological father's surname. A detail they treated like a convenient loophole whenever they wanted to push me out. A moment later, Grant slid a folder toward me without looking up. The embossed silver crest glimmered along the edge, the same crest my mother helped design when the company was nothing more than a hopeful idea and a rented basement office. "It's just a restructuring acknowledgement," he muttered. "Sign it so we can move forward." Forward for them, backward for me. I opened the folder. Role suspended indefinitely. Strategic access revoked. Removed from all high-level development sessions. Not fired. They weren't foolish enough to sever the one person who knew where every system flaw, every misfiled document, every financial inconsistency lived. They needed my infrastructure. They just didn't want me in the room when decisions were made, especially not now, not when the buyout offers were reaching 8 figures and Silicon Valley sharks were circling. Eleanor's voice softened. "You'll still receive your dividends, sweetheart. This is a family company. Try to understand." Translation: sit quietly. Cash your crumbs. Stop asking questions. Something inside me stilled, not rage. Something colder, sharper, as if a lock turned behind my ribs. I closed the folder, gently. If they wanted me invisible, that was fine. Most people never notice who's holding the match until the room is already burning. You're watching True Revenge, where every betrayal gets what it deserves. I stood, pushed my chair in, and walked out silently. They thought they'd shut me out of their empire. They didn't realize I'd spent years memorizing every exit and every weak beam in their foundation. I didn't go straight home after leaving the boardroom. I walked down California Street, past the glass towers that mirrored a version of San Francisco I never quite belonged to, past the cable car tracks humming beneath my shoes, past the exact cafes where I used to work late nights fixing the operational messes Lucas or Grant created, all while they posted pictures from Tahoe or Cabo. I knew the city better than they ever would, not because of privilege, but because I navigated its corners the way people do when they're building something from the ground up. Slowly, patiently, quietly, and yet somehow in that family, quiet turned me into a ghost. My mother, Lila, used to say I had a mind built for systems. "You see the patterns people try to hide," she'd whisper as she helped me sort old receipts, reorganize drawers, fix broken appliances. She married into the Vale family when I was 13, newly widowed, carrying nothing but determination and a daughter. She believed marrying Eleanor's late brother would give us stability. She didn't realize she was walking us into an empire full of polished floors and unspoken hierarchies. The kind where smiles were bargaining chips and kindness was a performance. When she died a few years later, everything shifted. Eleanor didn't throw me out. She didn't have to. She just made sure I understood. Through silence, through small exclusions, through the way she introduced me at events as my husband's daughter, that I wasn't one of them. And yet I joined the company anyway. Not because they asked, but because the company was the one place my mother had left her fingerprints. Her design notes, her early prototypes, her dreams. I started as an assistant, sorting files in a back room with flickering fluorescent lights. I learned every system, every operational failure, every undocumented workflow. When a crisis came, a server crash, a client meltdown, a missing financial report, I was the one who stayed until 3 a.m. fixing it. Quietly, steady, invisible, but indispensable. Lucas would stroll in the next morning and present my work as his own. Investors praised him. Eleanor would beam proudly. Grant would clap him on the back, as if competence was hereditary. But I kept going, because someday I believed they'd see my value. Someday I believed they'd acknowledge what my mother had built. Someday I believed I'd be treated like family. But belief erodes when the evidence keeps contradicting it. The small exclusions became larger ones. Strategy meetings I used to run shifted to family only. Performance reviews went missing. Emails stopped including me. Access permissions quietly changed. And every time I asked why, someone would say, "It's complicated. It's temporary. You know how these things are." But walking down California Street that morning, watching sunlight fracture against skyscraper windows, I felt something settle quietly inside me, like a truth I'd been circling for years finally stepped into the light. They were never going to give me a place at that table. Not because I wasn't capable, but because acknowledging me meant acknowledging my mother, and the part of the company she built that they had quietly rewritten out of history. The irony? They didn't know I had the one thing they'd never accounted for. The one document my mother left behind, the one they assumed didn't exist, the one that legally placed me inside the company in a way they couldn't erase. But I wasn't ready to reveal that yet. Not until every piece was in place. Not until the truth could do something sharp, something structural, something they'd never recover from. 2 days after the boardroom ambush, I arrived at the office before sunrise, a habit born from years of cleaning up behind people who pretended competence. San Francisco was still half asleep, its skyline washed in muted blue as the fog curled around the bay. I scanned my badge at the turnstile. Red light. Access denied. I tried again. Denied. That tiny beep told me more truth than any member of the Vale family ever had. Someone had revoked my executive access overnight. A security guard I'd known for years, Mario, who always saved me the good coffee from the break room, shifted uncomfortably. "Marissa, they told us you were moving departments." Departments. As if they hadn't spent a decade benefiting from my work only to exile me when the company finally became valuable enough for outside investors. I thanked him quietly and took the elevator up, expecting at least my office to be untouched. It wasn't. My nameplate was gone. A clean rectangle of untouched paint where it had been ripped off. Inside, boxes sat on the floor, half-packed, like someone wanted to erase me but got tired midway through. My files were scattered, drawers rifled through, folders missing. On my desk was a note in Eleanor's handwriting. "Please return your company laptop and step away from any sensitive materials. We'll transition you soon." Transition. Stripped access. Locked out systems. Removed from meetings. Publicly dismissed in front of investors. I hadn't just been sidelined. I'd been erased. Lucas appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, don't take it personally," he said. Mom just wants a tighter group handling the big decisions before the buyout talks resume. You know, real family. Real family. The words slid across the room like oil. And the mess in here? I asked. He shrugged. Grant was looking for something. Not sure what. I did know, because there was only one thing worth tearing my office apart to find. My mother's original incorporation binder. The one they didn't know I had taken home years ago. The one with her signatures. The one naming me legally as a founding technical officer, with rights they absolutely didn't want disclosed. My mother had been brilliant. Quiet, but brilliant. She anticipated exactly who the Valles were long before I did. And she had built protections into the company charter they never thought I'd uncover. But now, they were hunting for it. Grant must have realized someone accessing the old archive logs saw the discrepancy, and he assumed it was me. He wasn't wrong. Still, I kept my voice even. What exactly are you afraid I'll find? Lucas laughed softly, too softly. Nothing, because you won't be anywhere near the deal when the signatures go down. It's done. He stepped closer. And honestly, it's better this way. You're good at operations, sure, but this, he gestured vaguely toward the city skyline, this level of business isn't really your lane. My lane. The same lane I built for the company from the ground up. The same lane they paved over with their last name. But there was something else, too, a flicker of panic behind Lucas's confidence. A brittleness. And suddenly I understood. They weren't pushing me out because I was irrelevant. They were pushing me out because I'd become dangerous. Someone, maybe Grant, maybe Eleanor, realized too late that I had been auditing old systems. That I had noticed financial irregularities they'd been hiding behind my reports. Their fear wasn't losing control. Their fear was exposure. In that moment, something inside me aligned. Not a snap, not a breaking point, a recognition, a blueprint clicking into place. I wasn't the outsider they were discarding. I was the one person capable of dismantling everything they'd built on top of my mother's work. And all I needed were the right documents. The ones they assumed they could bury before anyone noticed. But I wasn't the one who should be afraid of paper trails. They were. I didn't go home after Lucas left my office doorway, smirking like he'd already won. Instead, I walked 3 blocks through early San Francisco fog, the kind that wraps around buildings like a secret, and stepped into a tiny cafe tucked between 2 high-rises. It was the only place where the Wi-Fi was decent, and the baristas didn't ask questions. I opened my laptop. My laptop, the one they didn't know still held administrator-level access to the legacy systems, because my mother had been the one who built those systems, and she gave me the original master credentials before she died. They'd rewritten the servers since then, but old architecture doesn't disappear. It just hides behind newer paint. It took 20 minutes to re-enter the old shell, 5 more to access the archived monthly reports, and just seconds for the first anomaly to appear. Grant had been siphoning money from R&D budgets, not thousands, but millions disguised under vague project codes and vendor names that didn't exist. Transfers routed through holding companies tied to his personal accounts in Los Angeles and Miami. His misconduct went back 7 years. Lucas wasn't innocent either. He had been quietly rerouting client acquisition fees and diverting commissions, covering the gaps with falsified growth projections. The performance deck he bragged about endlessly, the one Eleanor flaunted at investor dinners, was built on data that wasn't just massaged. It was manufactured. And Eleanor, hers was the worst, buried in the original incorporation documents, the ones they had shredded copies of, thinking the past didn't matter, was a handwritten amendment from my mother that no one but the attorney of record would have known existed. If Marissa Vale is to reach senior strategic tenure within the company, no controlling decision may be made without her access to all financial records. Eleanor had violated that clause repeatedly. Every concealed meeting, every buyout conversation, every memo excluding me, all of it directly contradicted a legal provision they either dismissed or never read closely enough. My hands went still on the keyboard. This wasn't just family betrayal. It was corporate fraud. Systemic. Calculated. Documented. For a moment, the cafe noise faded. Cups clinking, espresso machines hissing, someone laughing near the counter. All of it felt far away, like I was submerged under a new awareness. They had spent years treating me as decoration, all while stacking their entire empire on paperwork that proved I had more right to the table than any of them. I knew I couldn't do this alone. So I sent a message to someone who owed me a favor. Elias Warren, corporate attorney, quiet genius, frequently underestimated, like me. We'd worked together years ago on a compliance overhaul that saved the company from a lawsuit. I had protected him. Then, he never forgot it. He texted back within minutes. Bring everything. Tonight. Don't send anything over email. When I arrived at his office, a glass tower overlooking Market Street, Elias stood beside a long table already cleared for documents. His expression didn't change as he scrolled through the files I brought, but his jaw tightened. "This isn't minor misconduct," he said. "This is deliberate structuring. Multiple parties. Years of concealment." I nodded. "And the original amendment?" he asked. I handed it to him. He read it twice. Slowly. Then he looked up at me, really looked, and the air shifted between us. "You were never just an employee," he said quietly. "Your mother built a legal backbone they completely ignored. If we move at the right moment, you won't just expose them." He slid the papers back toward me. "You'll control the direction of the company when it goes public." A calm clarity settled over me. Not triumph, not revenge. Understanding. Understanding the scale of what they tried to erase and what I now had the power to uncover. Elias opened a new folder and placed the first document inside. "Tell me," he said, "how far are you willing to go?" I exhaled slowly, far enough to make sure no one ever erases my mother's name again. Elias didn't waste time with dramatics. He moved like someone assembling a machine he'd already built in his mind, steady, methodical, deliberate. Papers lined the table. Digital copies synced to an offline drive. Every move was quiet, but the quiet carried weight. "We can't confront them head-on," he said. "Not yet. They'll bury evidence the moment they sense a shift." I nodded. I had lived my entire adult life studying the way the Valles reacted to threats. Eleanor deflected. Lucas panicked. Grant improvised lies on the spot. Predictable patterns. Predictable weaknesses. "We start by locking your rights into place," Elias continued. "Your mother's amendment gives you legal standing they never accounted for. Once we register that clause with updated filings, they won't be able to alter anything without you." The idea moved through me like a slow current. Not flashy, not loud, but irreversible. Next came phase 2, collecting evidence in a way that couldn't be contested. Internal audits. Screenshots of transactions routed through Miami accounts. Copies of fake vendor contracts. Time-stamped access logs only I could decode. Elias watched me assemble the documents with a precision I'd spent years hiding. "You've been preparing for this without knowing it," he said. I didn't reply, but he was right. The final layer of the plan emerged just after midnight. We would file the preliminary IPO documents, the earliest, quietest stage, with my name listed exactly where the original incorporation required it. Right beside founding technical officer. By the time the family realized what had shifted beneath them. The filing would be public record. Immutable. Unraveling everything they'd constructed behind closed doors. Elias closed the final folder and looked at me. "Once we do this," he said, "there's no going back." I met his gaze. They forgot whose blueprint they were standing on. I picked up the folder, and now they're about to feel the missing floor give way. The morning everything shifted. San Francisco felt unnervingly quiet, the kind of quiet that settles right before a storm touches down. I arrived at the Vail Dynamics Tower before sunrise, slipping through the revolving doors while the security lights still flickered against the marble floors. Elias had filed the preliminary IPO notice at 4:17 a.m. By 7:03 a.m., it was public. By 7:16 a.m., the family group chat, the one I was never included in, had begun detonating. I watched from my desk as notifications lit up the corner of my screen. "Call me now." "What did you do?" "Undo this immediately." I didn't respond, not out of spite, but because silence carries more weight than explanations. The first person to storm into the operations floor was Lucas. His face was blotchy, shirt half tucked, eyes frantic. "You filed an IPO," he snapped, "without authorization." I turned toward him, slowly. The authorization was already written. You just never bothered to read the original agreements. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, like someone drowning without water. He didn't know whether to yell or negotiate. Neither would help him. Then came Eleanor. Her heels struck the glass stairs like accusations. She held her phone in one hand, shaking with restrained fury. "Marissa," she said, voice thin as wire, "you need to withdraw the filing. Right now." "It can't be withdrawn," I replied. "Not without every founding officer signing off. My mother included." Her expression froze. She understood immediately. It was a move she couldn't counter. Behind her, Grant hovered, paler than usual, avoiding eye contact. He knew the audits would catch his creative accounting. He also knew the IPO meant every irregularity would soon be reviewed by federal eyes, not family ones. "This is sabotage," Eleanor whispered. "No," I said softly. "This is transparency." She stepped forward like she wanted to reclaim control, but the footing had already shifted beneath her. Every investor who had treated me like invisible staff, every executive who thought I didn't belong in the room, every relative who believed my silence equaled ignorance. They were all watching the same announcement now. Vail Dynamics, public offering. Primary founding authority, Marissa Vail. Elias sent a final text to my phone. They can't stop what's already in motion. The family had spent years treating me like a shadow. Now the spotlight was fixed squarely on them, revealing every fracture they'd tried to bury. The IPO finalized on a Thursday. It wasn't dramatic. No explosions, no shouting, no courtroom steps lined with reporters. Just a digital confirmation, a quiet ping on my phone, and a new beginning I didn't need anyone's permission to step into. By the time the market closed, Vail Dynamics no longer belonged to the family who'd spent a decade trying to erase me from its future. It belonged to shareholders, regulators, structure, sunlight. Eleanor and my stepbrothers still held stock, but not control. The days of backroom decisions and whispered power plays were over. Every misstep, especially Grant's, was now subject to audits they couldn't charm or intimidate their way out of. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. Instead, I walked out of the Pacific Heights house one last time, letting the door click gently behind me. In the weeks that followed, life grew quieter in a way I hadn't expected. I moved into a modest loft in Mission Bay, somewhere with wide windows and enough light to remind me I still existed outside their shadows. For the first time in years, My mornings weren't dictated by crisis control or tiptoeing around egos. People kept asking if I felt vindicated. The truth, what I felt was space, the kind you only notice after you've been crushed into corners for too long. One evening, standing on my balcony, watching the city lights shift across the bay, I understood something. I hadn't taken their company from them. I'd simply returned it to the world it should have belonged to all along. And in doing so, I reclaimed something far more valuable than power. I reclaimed myself. This was true revenge, where pain becomes purpose.